The economics of owning a U.S. oil refinery. Okay, so you want to own an oil refinery. Good news.
There are roughly 130 operable refineries in the United States.
They are the ultimate bottlenecks of global energy, running around the clock to process over 17 million barrels of crude oil every single day. It sounds like the ultimate license to print money. You control the literal lifeblood of the economy, selling a product that every commercial fleet, airline, and driver needs with total predictability. It is not. The refining industry is one of the most volatile, capital-intensive, and operationally punishing businesses on Earth. It is so brutal that no major, high-capacity, grassroots refinery has been built from scratch in America since 1976. By the end of this video, you will understand the staggering expenses required to keep the fires burning. The complex trading math that determines whether you make billions or slide into bankruptcy. And the invisible regulatory trap that costs individual refiners hundreds of millions of dollars a year. Part 1: The outrageous cost of admission. Let's start with what it actually costs to get in. Building a modern, high-complexity refinery in the U.S. capable of processing 150,000 barrels a day requires an upfront capital investment of between $5 billion and $10 billion. Because a multi-billion-dollar entry fee is a non-starter, players in this market almost never build new. Instead, they buy older facilities from integrated oil giants like Exxon or Shell and spend hundreds of millions upgrading them. And half of that initial purchase price doesn't even go toward the core processing units. It is burned on massive off-site infrastructure, sprawling tank farms to hold weeks of crude inventory, heavy-duty wastewater treatment plants, and deep-water marine docks. Part 2: The daily operational burn. Once your refinery is bought, the daily operational bleed begins. Refinery expenses are strictly split between variable and fixed costs, and the variable math is jaw-dropping. To turn thick crude oil into clear gasoline, a refinery consumes an unbelievable amount of energy. The natural gas needed to fire the massive distillation furnaces can cost a medium-sized facility between $200,000 and $500,000 every single day. Then come the chemical consumables. To crack heavy molecules into high-value fuels, you have to buy expensive catalysts, often utilizing precious metals like platinum and highly specialized zeolites that degrade over time. When you add the cost of massive water filtration, chemical additives, and environmental waste disposal, your variable operating costs alone will run between $4 and $7 for every single barrel of oil that passes through your system. Part 3: The fixed bleed and the 100. But it's the fixed costs that break refiners during market downturns. You are operating a high-hazard chemical facility that must run 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. You cannot simply turn it off when fuel prices drop. That requires a permanent army of specialized chemical engineers, control room operators, and emergency response crews, whose collective annual payroll runs deep into the tens of millions. Then there is the ultimate expense, the turnaround. Every 3 to 5 years, a refinery must completely shut down a primary processing unit for scheduled maintenance, safety inspections, and complete equipment overhauls. A single major turnaround can take 4 to 6 weeks. Cost between $50 million and $150 million in parts and contracted labor, and strip away millions more in lost production revenue while the units are completely offline. Part 4: The crack spread math. With overhead expenses this high, how do you actually make money? You don't care about the raw price of crude oil, you care about a market mechanism known as the crack spread. The standard industry benchmark is the 3-2-1 crack spread. The market math assumes that for every 3 barrels of crude oil you buy, your refinery can crack it into 2 barrels of gasoline and 1 barrel of distillate, like diesel or jet fuel. If 3 barrels of crude cost you $210, but the resulting gasoline and diesel sell on the wholesale spot market for $260, Your gross theoretical margin is $50 for that chunk, or about $16 per barrel. But no refinery captures that margin perfectly. After you subtract your actual equipment yield inefficiencies, transport costs, and your $5 to $7 operating cost, a sudden drop in global fuel demand can instantly turn a highly profitable spread into a multi-million-dollar daily loss. Part 5. The Invisible Regulatory. Finally, there is the invisible regulatory hurdle that catches independent refiners off guard. In the United States, merchant refiners, facilities that just refine oil but don't own retail gas stations, face a massive compliance trap called the Renewable Fuel Standard. Under federal law, if you do not physically blend renewable biofuels like ethanol into your final fuel products yourself, you are legally forced to purchase paper compliance credits known as RINs, or Renewable Identification Numbers. Because you are forced to buy these credits from competitors who do have blending infrastructure, the cost can be staggering. For independent refineries, purchasing RINs to satisfy EPA mandates can easily become their single largest operating expense outside of buying raw crude oil, sometimes costing up to $200 million to $400 million a year. Layer that on top of strict clean air mandates, mandatory continuous emissions monitoring infrastructure, and multi-million-dollar liability insurance premiums, and the regulatory landscape acts as a relentless financial squeeze. The bottom line: owning a U.S. refinery is a high-stakes game of extreme macroeconomic leverage and ruthless operational discipline. You are running an incredibly expensive, isolated ecosystem of heavy steel and volatile chemistry where the margin on your product leaves absolutely zero room for operational error. If you found this deep dive into downstream energy economics helpful, hit that like button and subscribe for more business breakdowns. Let me know in the comments, do you think running an oil refinery will remain a viable business over the next 20 years?